Hello and welcome to BikeSocial. I'm Michael Mann and you join me here at a beautiful and sunny North Norfolk coast. We're here in Hunstanton. Now, got a little quiz for you. What bike weighs 1/3 less than this, but makes half as much torque? It's the Panigale V4R, can you believe that? So this bike, this is the GT version of Triumph's 2020 Rocket 3, and it makes twice as much torque as a Panigale V4R, but the trouble is it weighs at least 1/3 as much as well. Now, Triumph at the beginning of 2020 released the two versions of this Rocket 3. They released the R, which is a bit more sporty model in terms of its seating position. It doesn't have the luggage bits, it has straight bars, it doesn't have the fly screen. And this is the GT version, which is, as the name would suggest, a bit more of a touring oriented bike. This particular bike I've got right here has got a few extra bits on it as well. It's got the sports panniers, it's got the pannier mounted kit, it's got the luggage rack, it's got bar end mirrors, all of which, including VAT, are about 1,100 quid on top of the 20,200 pounds it costs to buy this bike in the first place. So what I am going to do in this video is try and talk about living with the bike. So I'm going to come up with some good bits and some bad bits. I went on the launch of this bike back end of 2019 when they launched the bike at the press launch in Tenerife. I got to ride both bikes, seriously impressive stuff in terms of its build quality, in terms of its engine, in terms of its, let's say, dexterity. Look, it's a massive bike, it's very heavy, there's no hiding that, but actually the way in which it handles its weight is very, very good. So you can read the full review of that at bikesocial.co.uk. And now this video is like a lead on, so we're just going to live with the bike, we're just going to be familiar with it, check out its MPG, and then talk about the good bits and the bad bits. All right, let's go riding. All right, let's do this. Let's start with the good bits and I'll move on to the less good bits. Starting at, well, what we can see here right in front of us, the latest generation TFT instrument panel. I think it's the second generation, that's what Triumph call it, and I think they divide opinion. So on a bike with this kind of heritage, like this big old cruiser, you'd be fair to assume that a more, I don't know, a traditional, maybe analog display wouldn't have gone amiss. I know the Speed Twin has one, so perhaps if it was transferred onto this model, it might just sort of suit the styling a little bit more. I like it. I mean, I think I like the digital display. I like the variety of options you have. I like the information available. I think it's nice and clear, it's easy to see, and you can transform it from having a dark background to a light background. All controllable at random by 3 buttons across the handlebars. So you've got a home button, a mode button, which is your riding modes, and then this 5-way joystick, up, down, left, right, and in. Tiny little joystick that it is too. The whole system is fairly foolproof to operate, easy to understand. You just follow what it says on the screen, really. I like the variety of options. I like how easy it is. So yeah, I think it might divide opinion, but I'm certainly putting it under my good bits list. I like it. Next up, the quality of this bike, and I'm talking about the finish, I'm talking about the build quality, I'm talking about the attention to detail. We've looked at the pillion foot pegs, the way they fold up and neatly tuck themselves away, the way in which the wiring is hidden across the handlebars, the way in which the engine looks. And then only when you do start to, but it literally is only when you start to nose around the bike you realise actually how much attention to detail the Triumph's designers and engineers have paid. It's top notch. Next up, I just cannot emphasise how powerful this thing is. You get an almighty heave from the engine. 165 brake horsepower, 163 foot-pounds of torque, and they're massive figures. It's got to carry around an enormous great thing. Was it 294 kilos, I think it is, plus the little extras, the panniers and the extra bits that this particular bike's got on it. But it's all about how fantastic it catapults it around. It's versatile too. There's loads of low down pull, it's free revving. It peaks about 6,000 RPM, which is not massive. Pulls like a freight train all the way. The red light's about 6.5, and it gets there quickly. So I'll talk about noise in a minute, but under hard acceleration, you are desperate to hear it keep going and going and going. but then the red line hits really quickly, and then you need another gear. But the fueling is excellent, the throttle connection is on point, it's ever so smooth to ride, defying its size and its weight. But with all that power and torque comes responsibility, and you can rely on the mega and massive brakes to a degree. But if you get it wound on too much, then do so with that weight in mind, because it takes some stopping. Look, acceleration wise, I think Triumph produced a video a couple of months back, and it was 0 to 60 in 2.73 seconds. It beat a McLaren car. This thing is so quick. Next, appearance. So it really does make you stand out. From the single-sided swing arm, from those beautiful wheels, aren't they? Don't they look fabulous? It makes you stand out without being too leery. You know what I mean? So people look at it and they don't think, "No, you're an idiot." They think, "Oh, that's pretty cool." It's different. It's a talking point. There's a lot of people who have stopped me, particularly on this trip and on the launch, to have a look at the bike and ask me questions. People who don't even ride. So obviously the one side where you've got a twin exhaust exit and you've got the exposed wheel is the better of the two sides. There's slash cut exhaust look ace, and whereas the shaft drive on the other side is less appealing. And the engine looks mega as well, with the 3 cylinders, the 3 exhaust headers coming out. It looks fantastic. I really like it. And if you spent so much time on making something look good, and I'm talking about the Triumph engineers, then why not show it off? I think it looks fantastic, especially this GT as well. It's kind of got a heritage look about it too. It doesn't look like a modern new bike, the GT I'm talking about. The R does a little bit more. It's a bit more sporty, of course. Riding position is good, very, very good. I'm a fan of that, especially on the GT. It's very comfortable. Look, I've ridden a few cruiser or bobber style bikes, and I'm not particularly. My frame doesn't really suit it. It's especially like my coccyx; it gets hurty. But on the GTs, the seat height's about 750mm, which is 23mm lower than the R. It's heavier. Well, it's only 3k heavier. That's not even 1% of its overall weight. And those swept back bars, nice seat rest. It's comfortable. It's wide. It's easy to get on for such a big thing. Windscreen and heated grips are stock. That's pretty cool. I think if I owned it, I might be weighing up the pros and cons of having a bigger screen, taller screen. It'd stop the wind buffeting at high speed, but it perhaps wouldn't look so good. Next, what are we on now? 6? We're on 6, I think. It's sort of authenticness, particularly the ride. She's a big old bear, and she's got plenty of boom, like we've talked about, with that loads of torque. Wind her on, and that kind of chuggy and very untriple-like noise becomes quite jet fighterish in a way. It's deep and it's rumbling. It's quite distinctive. It's not designed for sporty riding, but once you get it going, I just love how it makes you feel. It's got a lot of soul, and that moves me on to the next point. It's all about how it makes me feel. I feel very cool on it. I feel like I'm the king of the road without being bolshy. You know, I feel like. Well, look, on the press launch last November, we rode around the touristy areas of Tenerife. There's buses, there's hire cars. They're all driving erratically. But look, wherever we stopped, those tourists, whether they were bikers or not, they would much rather look at and photograph the rocket rather than some 120,000 high foot volcano. And I like people to acknowledge me on a bike, and it's half the reason why we ride them, right? Some machines I've ridden, Street Fighter V4S, for example, my long-termer, it's so loud that people look, but for the wrong reasons. Especially through towns when it's reverberating off the shops. And the same goes for this trip. Look, guys and girls were interested in the Rocket 3 over anything else when I was parked up. It's a conversation starter. We should call it the friend maker. Even from the front it looks happy, those twin headlights, the LED with the DRL with the daytime running lights, and the high wide mirrors. It makes it look like it's got a nice smiley happy face. It's kind of an approachable bike. Does that count as a good thing? Yeah. I tell you what else as well, again, for such a big old thing, it's very narrow, making it a lot easier to handle, specifically when you are filtering. This has got the panniers on it, it's also got these nice little sporty mirrors, but it doesn't make it much wider. So yeah, for such a big thing, it's nice to be narrow. And I tell you what else, it's got such grip, such grip. It's got a 150mm section front tyre and a 240 rear. Those Avon Cobra Chromes are developed specifically for this bike, and they do a fantastic job. You'll hit the pegs before you get to the edge of the grip of the tyres. You'll get ground in those little hero blobs. Not that you'd want to, but it's a lot of fun, especially if you're in the quicker corners on, let's say, a B road, or out of the way of the traffic, and you're winding her on a bit. Those tyres are tremendous. So, all right, let's move on. The slightly less good bits. We've talked about the sound. It's mean and it's moody and it's a cruiser, but it lacks that kind of sound character. It's very deep and a bit chuggy down low. Sounds a bit like a car. A lot of people have commented about that already on social media, on YouTube videos. I just think it could have been a little bit more distinctive. What I don't like about these controls, I mentioned it in my previous review, is the joystick control. I like the joystick control itself, but its proximity to the indicators, it's very sort of cramped in there. I can just imagine, like I'm in summer gloves today, and it's reasonably easy. Once you're concentrating on where you're moving your fingers to and whatever you're doing with it, it's relatively easy. But I can imagine if you've got big winter gloves on, that's going to be a tricky old thing to, it can be quite dexterous. Also, the bike's over £20,000. Does this switchgear shout £20,000 premium to you? I'm not so confident. I don't think they're backlit either, so again, riding at night, you don't know what button you're pressing, unless you're really familiar with the setup. Weight-wise, we can't ignore it, the low-speed manoeuvrability, so literally like wheeling it out of your garage or into or out of a car parking space, perhaps at the supermarket. It's tricky, we know it's heavy, but if you're going to buy the bike, you're going to have tested it, you're going to have wheeled it around, you have to get used to it. It's not a big deal, but it's one that's... I tell you what though, actually, thinking about it, it does carry its weight very low down, and it does make moving around on the bike not too bad, let's say. Let's call it not too bad. So like I said, this is not a bad bit section, this is a slightly less good bit section. What else? Keyless ignition, right, so I like that modern day touch on this bike, like the smart dash. But if you're going to have a keyless ignition, then make the keyless bit smaller than a brick. It is huge. It's not particularly comfortable to carry around in your trouser pockets. You've got to find a big pocket to put it in. And then if you do like locking the fuel cap, you then got to find it and fiddle about with that. You can always not lock it, but anyway, I tell you what else, the proximity of the key isn't massive either. There's been occasion where I've sat on the bike, been riding it, and it tells me on the dashboard that the key isn't within range, and yet it's sitting in my pocket. What else? Fuel cap. We talked about fuel already with the key. Again, I like the design. I like that Monza style fuel cap. It's smart. You get to the fuel pump, you flip it open. Once you got the fuel plug, let's call it, we got that out, then what do you do with it? There's a hell of a chance it'll end up on the floor or you'll lose it. It's just a bit fiddly and unnecessary. All right, finally, and this is probably the biggest bugbear I have with the bike, it's economy. Look, it's a GT bike, it's got panniers, it's got cruise control, it's got the right kind of position for some big miles. 18-litre tank doesn't get you very far. You won't want much of a bigger tank, it's going to therefore have much more weight. So again, I appreciate there has to be a compromise here. So you've already got a lot of weight, you've already got performance. By adding weight and adding a bigger tank and therefore improving economy or certainly mileage, you're just going to be enhancing the weight. And so clearly Triumph are not daft, and they've made sure that they've got the right kind of tank on here. They claimed 41.5 mpg. I've averaged 37.7 over the last 200 or 300 miles, and I haven't been driving that crazy. So, it's been, I think that's a fair reflection. I think 37.7 is a fair reflection on some average riding. The orange warning light will come on and tell you your fuel range is low with about 40 miles to go. I got that down to 20 before filling up. It took 16.25 litres of fuel. Then it gave an estimated range of 170 miles according to the dash. Realistically, you're going to be looking for the petrol station at about 140 miles, I'd say. Not massive, it's okay, I've had worse, but it's a GT bike. It's supposed to go for a lot further than 140 miles, in my opinion. All right, I think that's all I've got to say about the Triumph Rocket 3 GT for now. So thanks for joining me. Don't forget to hit subscribe, and if you leave any comments or questions, I will come back to you. Well, I'll try to at least. Thanks again, see you soon.